Welcome everyone, Costin here with a fairly basic guide for Total War Pharaoh Dynasties, because there's plenty of people who are asking questions about how to play the game at the moment, how to deal with the various systems in the game. So I thought I'd just put together a video talking about these systems and how to really make it work in the best possible fashion in your campaign. Usually when you start a campaign, in this case, and as Ninurta starting a campaign, for the most part, default settings, no campaign customization. I have a video on the subject of campaign customization. I recommend you check it out. But the only things I've enabled here are allowing all features to be available from the start, allowing all ancient legacies, and also increasing my campaign movement range for the sake of demonstration purposes. Whether or not you want to change some of these things, that is going to be up to you. Your personal decisions, what you like, how you like your campaign to be. Some people might like a slower campaign, some people might like a faster campaign. Regardless of that, here are some of the essential things. When you start a campaign, you'll usually have one enemy army to deal with. Now, this is an army you're meant to defeat. In some cases, you might have a really good auto-resolve in a situation for both major and minor factions. In other cases, you won't have such a great auto-resolve. Usually, you can auto-resolve it, but here's the thing. You might have a second army or a settlement, or a second army and settlement to deal with on that same turn. Now, post-battle choices, you're going to have loot, you're going to have morale benefits, and you're going to have replenishment. Usually I go for replenishment, but there is a possibility to actually make your entire economy work from post-battle loot. Especially for characters that do have a particular benefit to that. So just keep that aspect in mind. So over here, like, I don't have to just worry about that initial army. I also have to deal with this secondary army and then the settlement. Though I wouldn't be able to reach that settlement unless I had the significant campaign movement range. So you got to be careful. Now, what are the kind of battle tactics you want to use? Well, there's a couple of things you want to worry about. First off, killing an enemy general is going to destroy enemy morale. So general sniping is important. However, it's not so easy to snipe a general because they basically can't die until the HP of their unit goes down to a certain level, a certain threshold. Not sure what that is, but that's what I know. And this applies to your generals as well. So if you lose your general, you're going to take significant morale penalty to your army, and it might cost you the battle. Now, you got to be aware of this because every settlement, minor settlement, if we consider the garrisons of these settlements, every settlement has a general in it. And then the AI also loves to build these outposts over here that also have a general in them. So it can be tricky in certain battles, especially when you're fighting over settlements, to cause that morale shock, to cause the enemy army to break, but it can break. Beyond that,
speak now.
Due to lethality and just in general combat, flanking and maneuvering on the battlefield is very important. If I were to fight these battles manually, what I do is try and pin the enemy in place with my infantry, and then use my archers to kill their archers, and try and do some flanking around with them to also use direct shots. Or you can use flaming shots if you do have them. And then cavalry, same thing. Charge, pull back, cycle charge, basically. Cavalry is not meant to stay in a fight. They are not going to do well in a stand-up fight. They're all shot cavalry. Same with chariots. The basic balance is, like, swordsmen are usually good all-rounders in terms of their capability in battles. And battle clubmen have a good amount of armor piercing. Axemen have a good amount of lethality. And with regards to range units, slingers kill archers. Archers deal with skirmishers and have overall the best damage against units. Skirmishers can do a lot of damage, but they also have very, very limited ammunition. So you kind of want to use them in a specialist role to flank around the enemy army. Like, that is very important. Settlement battles and sieges, it's all very important with respect to that. Okay, so that's the idea of battles in an essence. But let's talk about the economy. Let's talk about various campaign features over here. You have a whole bunch of resources. You have food, you have stone, you have wood, you have bronze, you have gold. The way this works is that food and bronze are mainly used for units. The vast majority of units in the game do require
I do this for Assyria.
And I'm just going to recruit a second general over here. The vast majority of units in the game do require food, and many of the good units do require bronze. Like, basically any unit past tier 1, the vast majority of them is going to require bronze. Quite a lot of bronze to recruit and a bronze upkeep. So bronze is really the most important resource in the game. And getting higher tier units is going to be very important. There is a significant difference between very basic tier 1 units that anyone can recruit from any settlements, like these Akkadian hunters and Akkadian farmers, versus, you know, faction units or higher tier units, or higher tier native units. Because units are split between your own faction units, which you can recruit from the vast majority of barracks, like in this case these three. So you get chariots, you get infantry, you get range units, and then native units, which are recruited from their own special barracks and can contain pretty much anything. It can contain archers, it can contain infantry, it can contain cavalry, chariots, depends on what you're talking about. Native units are recruited dependent on the area of the campaign map you're in. Faction units are always going to be available. Stone and wood are primarily used, or largely used, for settlements and also outposts, which are these structures you can build in a region to give you various benefits. What about gold? Well, gold is used for two things. It's used, actually for three things. It's used in the court. It's used for certain really good units, especially special recruitment units over here. I'll get into those in just a moment. And it's also used for instant construction. So over here, let's say, you know, I want to actually get myself some really, really good units. Well, I would first need to get that settlement to a higher tier in order to get access to those units in general. So gold can give you instant construction. And gold can be really important, especially early on in a campaign. Later on, it's not so important, but still very important. This brings me to the subject of trading, and something you do want to do a lot in a campaign. Regardless of who you're playing and how you're playing them, one of the things you are certainly going to want to do in virtually every campaign is something similar to this. Let's say, you know, I want Assyria's gold, right? 350, because I want that instant construction. Well, one of the things you might do is go to a faction and trade some resources that you don't need that particular turn, and instead get the gold that you need. And in this case, obviously, I don't want to trade away the bronze. You can also use declarations of war for this kind of thing. This is something you are going to be doing a lot in the course of your campaign. You can also get a barter agreement, because you don't have a regular trade agreement in this game. Instead, you have barter agreements. So one of the things I could do, let's say I don't really care about my stone right now, but I do really care about getting all of Assyria's gold. So one of the things I would do is something like this. Various agreements available in the game in terms of diplomacy. Also, barter agreements are a diplomatic agreement, so keep in mind this. If I were to try and declare war on them, it would hurt my reliability, right? As long as I have a treaty, it would really hurt my reliability, so you gotta be careful. It can also, these kind of barter agreements, even if, let's say, you know, I'm doing an agreement and I'm trading, you know, I'm getting one food for one stone, right? Just an example for 10 turns. Well, for 10 turns, this faction can't declare war on me without incurring a significant diplomatic penalty. And that is something you gotta be aware of with respect to it. And you are going to want to get that gold as quickly as possible, and you're gonna want to get those higher tier units as quickly as possible in your campaign. So I need more gold over here. So I can do a whole bunch of things for the sake of that gold. You can also get gold from, you know, post-battle loot, or in this case, let's say, you know, I become a vassal of Assyria, though maybe not recommended, right? You can also see which faction has a lot of gold, a lot of resources over here. You're typically going to get a much better deal from factions that have good relations with you, as opposed to factions that don't. So, for instance, you know, I give them 100 stone for all these turns. I give them a lot of resources. And I hopefully would be able to get all the gold I need to be able to start recruiting the units I want over here from tier 2. Though not really important in this case. It is a significant advantage to have early on, but it's not just important early on in a campaign. It's something overall, because you will lack resources that you need during the course of a campaign. And so you want to trade a lot of stuff. One of the things I would recommend to people do is increase the amount of resources that they start with from the beginning of a campaign, because quite bloody, frankly, on that particular subject, you are going to, because it can help you not having to spend so much time in your campaign trading away those kind of resources back and forth, right? Just something worth pointing out over there. It isn't really the greatest situation to be dealing with, really, in a significant number of ways. So over here, I'm just going to get some levies, because why not, right? Okay, so that's in terms of trading. What is very important, however, to keep in mind here, though, is this. You want to get higher tier units as quickly as possible in your campaign. Like over here, like as fast as possible, you want to get access to them. The reason you want to get access to those units as quickly as possible is because it will give you an enormous level of power. Higher tier units are going to do better than low tier units. Like, let's just compare these tier 3 or like these tier 2 sewer levies versus these Acadian farmers. More armor, more stats overall. They are more expensive. But you do have armies limited to 20 units. You can even lower the amount of units you can have. So one of the things you're going to be juggling with a lot, especially early on in a campaign, but throughout your campaign, is ensuring that your armies have a certain level of quality. I'd say tier 3, tier 2 units at the very least, while still maintaining your economy. You might play an entire campaign in an economic deficit, and that is fine. That is perfectly fine. Now, in terms of structures, let's talk about that a bit. You have various elements of different types. You have stone, you have food, you have bronze, all that. Now, elements dependent on their type will have various structures available to them. It could just be one type of resource structure. It could be multiple types of resources that you have access to. So for instance, over here I have, and obviously you do have, you do have like docks and all that. So over here, like, you can get a lot of food from docks. You can get wood from docks as well. It is something that you're going to have to grapple with and balance all of that out. What you typically want to do is get to, let's say, getting to good tier 3 units, and also at the same time building your economy. I would not bother with chariots too much early on, because they are expensive and they're not necessarily as powerful as you might hope for them to be, though obviously cavalry can be really good in a campaign, especially if you're horse archers. But yeah, chariots, not really a priority. It depends on the units you have. So for instance, one of the things I would want is Assyrian sappers. Why Assyrian sappers? Well, because if I'm not mistaken, they have siege attacker. So you can just instantly attack a settlement without having to wait for it. I'll talk about that towards the end of the video, and just pass a couple of turns in this campaign before I do so. But it depends on the units are available and what you can get that's good. Like, one of the things I would obviously want to get over here would actually be the native units. The reason I want to get those is because compared to the actual units I have here, yeah, I have sappers, but I don't really have great infantry over here. These guys don't have the shield, they take a lot of damage. So what I'd really want to do is start getting clubmen over here, combined with chargers maybe. Or, bite the bullet, get that tier 3 barracks, all that. So it depends on what you're dealing with during the course of a campaign. So a really important thing to, balance it out, balance those resources, balance what you're going to use and how you're going to use them. Now, let's talk about your characters. But actually, let me say more on buildings. Every building requires a surplus points. Workforce, idle workforce. You gain several points every turn. You can see the meter over here. There are various things that increase this, various structures that increase it. So you may want to actually even get structures that give you extra workforce growth. Whenever you take a settlement without looting, occupying it, without sacking it, or worse, raising it, you will gain some surplus points. So you have a situation where if you take an entire province in quick order, you can get a lot of surplus points in your province. So that's one thing that's important. The more surplus points you have, like at low level of surplus, you get happiness. A high level of surplus points, you lose happiness. But happiness is not too big of an issue because there's many ways to increase that happiness. Happiness itself increases workforce growth and gives you more allied units. Influence affects your resource production. Nothing else. Like influence is important for your economic provinces, the ones you established yourselves, not for ones that you've necessarily recently conquered. So if you want to generate resources, you're going to need influence. That is important because at a low influence, you're losing 75% of resources, except wood and stone, which are used for buildings. But it's basically all resources that you'd use to recruit units. That is an important factor. What I recommend in terms of resources: bronze, gold, bronze, then gold, then stone, then wood. In that order, food is the least important. The reason food is the least important is that food is the most plentiful resource that the AI will have. Like, the AI may not have a lot of other resources, like gold and bronze in particular, the AI lacks. They can have a lot of stone and wood, especially stone. But they will have an enormous level of food. So you can always trade things at a really good rate for the sake of food, like selling bronze. So don't worry too much about getting food. Worry a lot about getting a lot of bronze and gold. Stone can be a priority, but keep in mind, because the AI has so much stone, that they'll be willing to trade you at a fairly preferential rate in a campaign as well. So yeah, bronze and gold are very, very important. Now, let's talk about the ruling family mechanic that we do have access to over here. Actually, we can even go even further and ask to be adopted into the dynasty, so I can talk about the dynasty mechanic. This can be useful to address this. This can be useful in terms of gaining the crown. Now, the crown is something worth talking about in its own right, but essentially, if you get adopted into a dynasty and they don't have another heir, you'll become the heir, and if their faction leader dies for whatever reason, old age, death and battle, etc., you will become the faction leader for the dynasty, which means you will become, in this case, the king of the universe, with all of the powers that come with it. Again, this is something worth talking about in another video. I'll do a video on the Mesopotamian one. I do have a video on the Aegean one, but essentially there's a lot of mechanics that go in it. Don't worry too much about the power of the crown. Worry more about the court.
You are in this court
in a campaign. But when we're talking about the ruling family, one of the first things you're going to want to do is ensure everyone is married, because marriage gives you various benefits. You can increase the chance of having children. You can have various benefits to statistics. What are you interested in terms of statistics? Well, you're interested in various effects. So there's different tiers that give you different benefits. This one largely is focused on post-battle loot and replenishment. The one at the bottom, Ardor, is focused on campaign movement reach. And with these tiers, you get more benefits, but you also need to acquire certain points for various titles in your campaign. So for instance, you know, I want to increase my recruit rank, I'd probably have to spend free points over there, right? In that situation, in order to get that going. So various titles. You can get up to 4 titles, but they're unlocked at different levels. You have one slot over here from the very beginning. You can always remove titles. It takes 1 turn. 1 at 8, 1 at 16, and 1 at 27. You may also want to increase the experience you gain with generals. And one of the things I do notice is the AI is really bad at leveling its generals. Just kind of worth pointing out. You're going to have immortal faction leaders, but not immortal characters in general. But just immortal faction leaders, you can have them die quickly from age and all that. But very important to get marriages set up. Now, what's a bit annoying about this, so I'm going to go with this one because it would give me what I do want in terms of that. And you will have children as well. No problem on that aspect. It will take a bit. It will take a turn to get that effect, I believe. You can also adopt someone, or you can send... you can also adopt someone in your dynasty once you have the crown. Though you can't adopt someone in your ruling family, which can get a bit annoying. Very important here is you can get other characters married in your campaign as well. It is a diplomatic deal, but it can give you the stats that you need for your general. So just remember, it isn't just about your faction leader and the ruling family. It's also about all of the generals. So one of the things, you can offer a diplomatic marriage as well. Keep in mind, a diplomatic deal, very important. One thing that I will always value beyond resources is settlement. So if you take a settlement as LAI, they will give you the deal of the century. It might be a great thing to really get a lot of advantages in a campaign. So those kind of things are important. So higher tier units, trading resources, managing a ruling family. What else? Research and the gods. It's intrinsically tied together. You'll always start with one god, depending on who you're playing. It's going to be different, obviously. But then you have to unlock god dedication slots through research. That is one of the most important things to get as quickly as possible, because various gods give you different benefits. In many cases, the god you actually start with may not necessarily be the best. The way gods work is they have benefits from shrines that apply to a province. So in this case, he's giving me a recruitment rank, and there's different tiers. So for shrines, he's giving me a recruitment rank and influence. For a prayer, which requires interacting with the shrine, you get charge speed bonus and reload speed. For a devoted general, who you can only have one per god. Once you get to a high enough tier, so you do need to get to a higher tier with a god. You won't be able to devote a general at tier 1. But with a higher tier, you'll be able to devote a general, and he will have an inherent benefit. Only one devoted general per god, with the exception of a 10, who's an ancient legacy. Mesopotamians have dwellings, the Aegeans have hecatombs. What do those do? Well, dwellings are things you can construct in various settlements, because usually the way you increase favor with the gods is through shrines. But with the Mesopotamian gods, you can get dwellings which give you various benefits. So here, ammunition and recruitment, 5%, influence and favor, 25%. You can also build temples in provincial capitals for more favor, up to 140, and various benefits. Legitimacy, upkeep, happiness. Legitimacy is related to the power of the crown, so again, video on that. But basically, you mainly get this for two ways. You get it through battles. A lot of it is gained through battles. You can see over here that I got 8 from the battles I fought. You get some from characters and court positions. And some from sacred lands. Sacred lands, there's various territories in each territory that designated sacred lands. Those will give you some influence. There's various structures as well, monuments, landmarks, all that kind of stuff, that will also give you legitimacy. Keep that in mind. Now, for outposts, talking about that, you have 4 categories, unless we're talking about sea peoples, which are a bit unique. These usually require stone. So you have military outposts of different kinds. So you can get a siege holdout benefit, you can get the warrior refuge benefit for replenishment, but at the cost of food, experience per turn, chance of random unit to join the outpost garrison. You do have this one that gives you a garrison. This one has a general in it, and you can put units in it, like an ogre camp in Warhammer 3. And you can also put units in the warrior's refuge over here. So those are the kind of benefits you have. The AI loves building these, but they're kind of useless because you will generally benefit more in a campaign from building other things. Things like monuments. You can only have 1 monument per province, but having 1 monument is really useful because it gives you a good amount of legitimacy. Also, every time you interact with any structure, replenishment is 50% of the movement you use to get there. So very important that you build outposts and you use outposts. Then you have the way station. This gives you a 30% or over 30% movement range benefit on sea and land. There are certain things, certain gods that only give you, like Poseidon only gives you a sea benefit, but it's larger than anyone else, for instance. It also gives you attrition immunity, though it depends on what you're talking about. Egyptians don't actually have desert immunity, I think, from their way station. They get that from certain gods. Then you have an economic outpost, which increases production of all resources 10%. You kind of want one of these in every single settlement, region that you want. And then you have various shrines. Once you get 3 gods, you'll have 3 different kinds of shrines. And balancing that out will be very, very important. But my priority in a campaign is getting all the gods unlocked so I have all their powers. What kind of gods? There's a whole video I did on that, so recommend you check it out. But essentially, the things I would recommend going for are things like workforce growth, so get more surplus points, and things like movement speed. 30% movement speed, which stacks with the way station benefit. So you can pray for a couple of turns, get that benefit, and you can interact with the way station, get a couple of turns movement speed, allowing you to get down the campaign map. Those are the two things I would worry about. There's various combat benefits, range benefits, melee benefits, all that kind of stuff, but I would prioritize movement speed, I would prioritize workforce growth. Which god you decide to do, there to go for various benefits. I've done a whole video on talking about which are the best, which are the worst. Probably won't be able to link all the videos I want, but essentially that's it. Okay, the court. How does that work? You may start with the core position, you may not have any core position. Now, it depends which court you're talking about, because there's the Aegean court, so Troy and Mycenae. There's the Hittite court, the Mesopotamian court, and the Egyptian court. All of them work differently, somewhat. Depending on the position you have, you will get various benefits. It's stated here. You get some legitimacy and you may get some special units. So in this case, I get the Great Mitanni Chariots as elite unit, special recruitment, but I need to occupy the city I start with. Fair enough. I also get an action over here that gives me free court actions. Usually you only have one. Someone like Amon Mes can get extra ones. All right. Now you can do various things depending on who you're interacting with. So for instance, you can make, you need to get regard though. The way you get regard is either assisting for gold or gossiping for less. You can get 120 for free 60, or you can gossip for 50
if you insist.
with the cooldown, so you can't just use everything. And they give you various benefits. In the Mesopotamian court, the interacting with the king, or the king of the universe in this case, does require, to get regard with him, you do have to spend a lot of gold, more gold. So it's generally not worth it to interact with the supreme ruler of a court unless you have a lot of gold. More often than, but they can give you various benefits depending on what you're talking about. You can plot against them, various things like assassination, blackmail. Blackmail gives you regard and gold. Discredit gives you legitimacy. Depose removes them. That kind of stuff. You also have embezzle that you can potentially get in certain courts. Embezzle can help you with gold over there. It's a embezzle plot, so gain money if you want. So various elite units you play around with over here, various actions. You want to gossip a lot. In fact, the characters even joke like, you're gossiping worse than my mom. It's kind of hilarious when you think about it. Just keep that aspect in mind of what you're doing, dealing with over here, and how that works. But essentially, you want to gossip, gain regard, use that regard for various things. Simple as that. And once you become Supreme Ruler, you'll be able to fill up multiple court positions. You can only have one court position when you're a regular mortal. Once you become King of the freaking universe, you gain an item that you can only equip on your faction leader, based on certain conditions. And you can also, use royal powers. And some of those royal powers give you more court positions. Like, which one is it? Actually, you don't have an extra court position over here. Interesting. Though you can fill them up. That's because the positions you hold in the Mesopotamian court are dictated purely by the settlements you control. So in order to hold those positions, you need to control those cities.
What?
If you don't, you can't. So other courts would require you to use like you would always get an extra position for being the king of the universe, but if you want more in other courts, you would have to actually go get Power of the Crown. Video on that, check it out. Finally, there is the ancient legacy aspect. Whole video to be talked about, lots of ancient legacies, but essentially it comes down to this. There are various benefits that you get here. Now, inherently it's tied to the court you're in. So if you're in the Hittite court, you only get access to, the benevolent and the overseer. Some are much better than others in a court, in the situation. The best one, the one I recommend everyone go for, so unlock that feature to be able to use every ancient legacy, is the merchant. Why is the merchant so powerful? Well, the reason the merchant is so freaking powerful is what he does is this. Well, shit, we can generate bronze. But the reason the merchant is so powerful is you send away resources, right? Some resources, a lot of resources, doesn't matter. You send these resources. Each resource you have some infinite resources, depending on who you're starting with. And you have various destinations with various distances. Basically, you will get better trades. Like over here, if I, send 2 of these and the chariot, maybe the axe, maybe not. But if I send these, right, in 1 turn, I'll arrive at the destination. I'll be able to sell this for 40 points and stock up on food, on bronze, on stone over here. And you can keep sending caravans. Different locations you can send caravans to for various things like gold, bronze, etc. Bronze and gold, again, very, very powerful. So if you're lacking resources, this is why the merchant is the best by far. If I were to criticize Creative Assembly for any particular thing, is from my perspective, the merchant should be available inherently, because he's just so strong that playing without him is a nerf. I do use campaign customization to make up for that, but even so, it's like you're losing a lot. That's a ton of resources. The merchant can bankroll your entire economy, so I feel like that should just be inherently available to everyone. Then we got to talk about commands. Don't think I've forgotten about that. You have an active command and passive command. The way this works is that depend on the faction you're playing as, but essentially you have an unused command. In this case, though there's no cooldown on it, but usually you have an unused command that gives you various benefits. Then you have a passive one if you're not using it. Unused in this case would give me military training, but I need to get more military training to be able to use that, but it can give me recruit ranks over here. Alright, so cooldown 5 turns, various effects. In some cases, it's worth ignoring the active command and just getting the passive bonus all the time. In other cases, it's worth using active command as much as possible. Let's talk about civilization itself. Sea peoples, like there's various rogue armies that will spawn that you'll have to deal with. Pretty annoying. But one of the important things about the Bronze Age collapse game is the actual Bronze Age collapse. The way this works is you have a prosperity meter at the top here. This prosperity meter is determined by various cities in a campaign that are marked. I don't think there is actually one of them, but for instance, Assur's capital, if I were to become their vassal over here, Assur's capital is a civilization center, right? Or a cult center. Basically, these have like special temples of the gods, regardless of who you're worshiping. These are worth protect. The temples are, you don't want to destroy them. You want to keep them there. But these give civilization points. The higher the level, the more civilization points. Depend on how many civilization points exist on the map from these cult centers, you're either in crisis, collapse, prosperity. You start in prosperity, usually you'll go into crisis because factions will destroy or take those cities. And when you take a city, the level goes down by a point. Dependent on who you're playing, like in prosperity, you usually have some replenishment, and sea people and nomadic tribes will have like desert attrition immunity and movement on sea for sea people. In crisis, they get combat benefits and more and keep the attrition immunity as well as movement on sea. But you suffer a 10% replenishment penalty. You do get more resources from raising settlements, but you also lose morale. Then in a collapse, they get enormous benefits in combat, and you suffer 15% replenishment and 20% morale. They can be tricky to deal with, especially as towards the end of the game, if you're playing with the Sea People's invasion, they might be sending a lot of freaking troops your way. So just be aware of what you're dealing with and how you plan to deal with it. Like, strength, honor, you got to figure out the spawn points, because there are various spawn points to deal with over here in a campaign for these guys. Just be aware of that. Be aware, be cognizant, plan around that. That is going to be important.
Brave of you to come and
okay. So those are some of the
Perhaps we
things
should spot.
over here. The last thing I want to talk about is sieges and the siege auto-resolve in a campaign.
Nothing passes me by.
So next turn, as you can see, I've arrived over here with the caravan. I can trade these resources, get some bronze, get some stone, and then send it back, right? It would be better if I had more food to send over there, but it will certainly pay for itself. And yeah, I would just want to get these provincial capitals to a higher level. One of the things to mention, by the way, in the game is that certain buildings, specifically provincial capitals, but a couple of other buildings, as well as every unit that you're recruiting, has an administrative cost. It's not very high, but the way that works, that's your supply lines in this game. It doesn't matter how many armies you have. The way it works is not tied to armies at all. It's tied to how much stuff you have. You start with an upkeep and food benefit, but then as you go higher and higher at administration tiers, you get movement on land, recruitment rank for generals and units, but you get a gold recruitment cost plus 140% and 120% bronze and food upkeep. So the bigger your empire, the more stuff is gonna cost.
Set sail.
Over there.
I am
So just
destined to rule.
something worth pointing out, something worth being careful about. But what I want to talk about here is with respect to sieges.
To an extent. Battle. Submit to me.
Ignoring that particular army, which was besieging that settlement. Right there, because I want to besiege that settlement. I want to take that over. So talking about sieges.
You will taste a serious
The way
power.
sieges work in this game is you cannot inherently attack a settlement initially, unless you have some effect that allows you to do it. There's sappers that can do it. The Babylonian specialists, which Babylon starts with, can do it. But for the most part, if you're attacking a settlement, you're going to need to build siege equipment. Now, here's something very important about sieges, though. The more siege equipment you build, the better your auto-resolve is. This is a brilliant system because it allows you to avoid fighting 1,000 fucking sieges. That, in this case, this battle would not be interesting at all. In fact, I could have cheesed this battle because if they were besieging settlement, could have let the garrison just take a lot of damage and waltzed in and taken over. No problem. One thing, by the way, very important on auto-resolve, cavalry chariots will take a lot more damage. Armor matters, higher tiers matter. Not sure if experience matters all that much. But essentially, in terms of how this kind of stuff works, you will want to at least spend the turn besieging a settlement. You might have to spend multiple turns. You can avoid dealing with this if you attack an army right outside of settlement and do enough damage. But even in that case, you probably will have to spend at least one turn to get the effect you want. So yeah, I might regret making that particular decision over there, or I might not. You get one court action per turn, by the way. And you do have that 6-turn cooldown for extra court actions. You can ask for extra court actions if another faction has it. But just keep in mind, it is a request, and you're going to need that assist.
Bag of gold,
so just bear that aspect in mind over there. But that's the important thing about sieges to deal with. So if you're in a situation where you think, oh, the auto-resolve is bullshit, you can just wait longer. Of course, it would be best if you just spend one turn and take it over, but sometimes that won't be viable. So the more siege equipment you build, the better off you'll be. What I'd recommend you build is actually rams, but in this case, right, you know, it would take 2 turns for an extra ram, so I'm just going to build some ladders, and that is going to improve my auto-resolve there. I won't do this because these 2 armies are about to roll over me, but just keep in mind it is available, so just bear in mind. By the way, very important, unlike Warhammer 3, when you auto-resolve against armies on the field, they won't be destroyed. In Warhammer 3, they are. So be careful about that, because you can't just press a button and the entire army gets destroyed if you win. You gotta be concerned about the fact that you might be able to win on auto-resolve, but then the enemy you just fought against might just show up next turn with buddies to break your back. So be careful about that with auto-resolve. Firmly recommend fighting field battles, at least. Settlement battles, siege battles, you might auto-resolve those, but field battles you want to manually fight. One thing to understand, the reason I say that you should get higher tier units is because not just because of the benefit those units have, but because the AI is really bad at recruiting them as well. So just keep that aspect in mind. Costin, signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications. Stay tuned for more.